Sparkles when Jimin sings a tune that only Jungkook knows. Anxiety falls. Tears of love spill loudly. Crying face. Multiple musical notes. Don't stop, please. Don't stop singing. Jungkook gasped as the lights cut out and the stadium fell into a stunned, breathless dark. The world was already collapsing when Jimin heard the sound. Jungkook tried to hide the uneven breath. The tremor that meant panic had crossed the line into something dangerous. Thousands of fans were screaming, phones raised like constellations, but Jimin's focus narrowed to one place backstage where the air smelled of metal, sweat, and fear. Jungkook's hands were shaking so badly he couldn't unclench them, his shoulders rigid as if bracing for impact that no one else could see. The music had stopped mid-beat, a technical failure announced in crackling silence, and the sudden quiet was too loud for someone whose heart had begun to sprint without him. Jimin moved before anyone could stop him. He didn't ask the staff, didn't wait for cues. He crossed the stage like gravity had chosen him, boots thudding against the floor that still hummed with residual sound. Jungkook's eyes were unfocused, pupils blown wide, as if the darkness had become a tunnel with no end. This wasn't the first time anxiety had found him, but it was the first time it had struck so publicly, so violently, right in the middle of everything they had built. I'm here, Jimin said softly, but his voice was swallowed by the noise of confusion. So he did the one thing he knew would reach Jungkook even when words failed. He sang not the song on the setlist, not anything the audience recognized. It was a fragile tune, almost a whisper, shaped by memory rather than melody. Jimin had made it years ago in a cramped dorm room when Jungkook couldn't sleep. A series of notes hummed into the dark while rain tapped the window like a nervous heartbeat. He sang it now exactly the same way, breath warm, tempo slow, as if time itself had learned to kneel. Jungkook flinched at first, then stilled. His breathing hitched, once, twice, and then followed the rhythm Jimin laid out for him. The panic didn't vanish, it loosened its grip, confused by something gentler than fear. Tears slipped down Jungkook's face without warning, hot and humiliating, but Jimin didn't look away. He stepped closer, close enough that Jungkook could feel the vibration of the song through the air, through bone and memory. The audience began to realize something sacred was happening. The screaming softened into a hush so complete it felt like reverence. Phones lowered. No one dared interrupt. Jimin sang on, eyes never leaving Jungkook's. The tune carried the weight of everything they had never said out loud. The nights Jungkook pretended he was fine, the mornings Jimin noticed the cracks anyway, the silent promise that neither of them would ever face the dark alone. Jungkook's hands finally unclenched. He pressed his fingers into the fabric of Jimin's sleeve like an anchor, grounding himself in something real. I thought I was going to disappear, Jungkook whispered, voice breaking as the song ended on a trembling note. Like I'd fall apart and everyone would see. Jimin rested his forehead against Jungkook's, uncaring of cameras, of rules, of consequences. You don't disappear, he said. You stay. I stay. That's how this works. The lights slowly returned, softer now, painting the stage in gold instead of glare. Jungkook wiped his face with the heel of his hand, embarrassed, but Jimin caught his wrist gently, a habit he had when he wanted Jungkook to stop hiding. The crowd erupted into applause then, not the explosive roar of performance but something deeper, something grateful. Later, behind the curtain where the air was cooler and the world felt smaller, Jungkook sat with his back against the wall, knees pulled to his chest. His heart still raced, but it no longer felt like it was chasing him. Jimin sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder, their breaths slowly sinking the way they always did after storms. I hate that you know me that well, Jungkook muttered, trying for humor and failing. Jimin smiled, tired and tender. You love it, he said. Because I know when to sing. Jungkook closed his eyes, letting the words settle. His fear had roots, years of pressure, expectations that never slept, the constant terror of being the one who broke first. He rarely spoke about it, afraid that naming it would make it bigger. But Jimin had learned the shape of his silence, the way a musician learns an instrument, attentive to every subtle change. You never told me why you made that song, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin hesitated, then answered with the honesty he usually saved for moments like this. Because I was scared too. And I needed something that reminded me you were breathing. That we were still here. Jungkook opened his eyes, tears threatening again, different this time. He leaned into Jimin, resting his head against his shoulder without asking permission. The contact was simple, Devastatingly so. Jimin's arm came around him automatically, thumb tracing slow circles against Jungkook's arm, another unspoken language they shared. The night ended without spectacle. No encore, no dramatic announcement. Just two people sitting in the aftermath, letting the echoes fade naturally. When they finally stood, Jungkook felt steadier, like the ground had remembered him. As they walked down the hallway together, the distant murmur of fans still audible, Jungkook glanced at Jimin with a small, sincere smile. "If I forget how to breathe again," he said, "promise you'll sing." Jimin squeezed his hand once, a quiet vow. "I always will." And for the first time in a long while, Jungkook believed that anxiety could fall, that tears could mean love instead of fear, and that one simple tune known only by them could be enough to keep the darkness at bay. The hallway door slammed behind them, cutting the roar of the crowd into a distant, muffled thunder, and Jungkook finally let his shoulders collapse as if the weight of the entire stage had been pressing down on his spine. Jimin was the first to speak, and his voice wasn't gentle. "Are you insane?" he demanded, stepping closer, eyes blazing. "Do you have any idea what you just did out there?" Jungkook laughed once, sharp and breathless, running a hand through his damp hair. "I sang," he said. "For once, I sang something honest." "Honest?" Jimin's laugh cracked, pain bleeding through the sound. "You didn't just sing a song, Jungkook. You detonated a bomb." Silence snapped between them, tight and dangerous. Jungkook lifted his gaze, jaw clenched, eyes still shining with unshed tears. "I've been living with that bomb in my chest for years," he shot back. "You just never wanted to look at it." That landed hard. Jimin flinched, his anger faltering for a split second before it surged back stronger. "Don't do that," he said. "Don't make this about me being afraid. You think I didn't feel it too? You think I didn't notice the looks, the pauses, the things you never said? Then why did you keep walking away?" Jungkook's voice rose, raw now, stripped of the control he wore on stage. "Every time I got close, you pulled back like I was something dangerous." "Because you are dangerous," Jimin snapped. "To yourself. To everything you've built. I wasn't going to be the reason you got hurt." Jungkook stepped closer, the space between them evaporating. "You already were," he said quietly. "Just by leaving me alone with it." Jimin's breath hitched. He looked away, pressing his fingers into his palm as if grounding himself. "You think I slept peacefully," he murmured. "I watched you burn yourself out, smile through exhaustion, carry everyone's expectations like they were carved into your bones. I told myself distance was protection. And I told myself silence was love," Jungkook replied. "Turns out, they both just hurt." The air felt heavy, charged, like the seconds before a storm breaks. Somewhere down the hall, staff moved quickly, voices hushed, but no one dared interrupt them. Jimin finally looked back at him, eyes glassy. "What happens now?" he asked. "Because the world is going to ask questions you can't sing your way out of." Jungkook swallowed. Fear curled in his stomach, familiar and sharp, but beneath it was something steadier. "Now I stop pretending," he said. "I don't know what that costs. I just know I couldn't keep lying." Jimin shook his head slowly, tears slipping free. "You didn't even tell me you were going to do it." Jungkook's voice softened. "If I had, I wouldn't have been brave enough." That confession cracked something open. Jimin laughed weakly, wiping his cheeks with the back of his hand. "You always do this," he said. "Jump without looking, then act surprised when you're bleeding. And you always stand at the edge," Jungkook replied, "convincing yourself it's safer not to jump at all." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of electricity in the walls, the lingering echo of the song, the scent of sweat and metal wrapped around them like a cocoon. Jimin took a step closer, close enough that Jungkook could feel the heat of him. "Do you know what they'll say?" Jimin whispered. "They'll twist it. They'll speculate. They'll turn something real into a scandal." Jungkook nodded. "I know. And you're still standing here," Jimin said, voice trembling, "looking at me like it's worth it." Jungkook reached out, hesitating just a second before letting his fingers brush Jimin's wrist. The contact was light, almost cautious, but it sent a shock through both of them. "It is," he said. "You are." Jimin's breath stuttered. He didn't pull away. You don't get to decide that alone, he whispered. I'm not, Jungkook replied. I'm asking you to decide with me. That was the most terrifying part. Jimin closed his eyes, memories crashing in years of restraint, of almosts and what ifs, of loving someone quietly so the world wouldn't notice. When he opened them again, there was fear there, but also something new, something defiant. You put my name in your song, he said. You didn't even hide it. Jungkook gave a sad smile. I hid it long enough. Footsteps approached, voices calling Jungkook's name, urgency creeping in. The reality of consequences pressed closer. Jimin glanced toward the sound, then back at Jungkook. This changes everything, he said. Jungkook squeezed his wrist gently, then let go. Maybe everything needed to change. Jimin exhaled shakily, a mix of laughter and tears escaping him. You're impossible. And you still stayed, Jungkook said softly. They stood there, no longer fighting, not yet certain, but undeniably closer to the truth than they had ever been. Outside, the noise swelled again, the world hungry for answers. Inside that narrow hallway, two hearts beat too loudly, no longer willing to pretend they didn't hear each other. The meeting room smelled like cold coffee and polished wood, a place designed to drain warmth from anything human. Jungkook sat stiffly, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Across the table, executives spoke in measured tones, words like image, boundaries, and risk management sliding across the surface like knives disguised as paperwork. Jimin stood beside him instead of sitting, arms crossed, posture defiant in a way that made the room subtly uncomfortable. This isn't about discipline, one of them said, voice smooth. It's about control. The moment last night went beyond performance. Jimin didn't blink. It went beyond performance because Jungkook isn't a machine. The temperature in the room dropped. Jungkook's breath caught. Jimin, he warned quietly, fear flickering back into his eyes. No, Jimin replied, not looking at him. They keep talking as if what happened was a malfunction. It wasn't. It was a person struggling to breathe. Another executive leaned forward. And your solution was to expose that struggle in front of millions. Jungkook flinched. I didn't want. You didn't expose anything, Jimin cut in sharply. The pressure did. The silence did. I just refused to pretend. Silence slammed down, heavy and unforgiving. Jungkook felt heat rise behind his eyes, a mix of humiliation and anger. You think I wanted them to see me like that? He snapped suddenly, surprising even himself. Shaking. Crying. Weak. Jimin finally turned to him. You weren't weak. You don't get to decide that for me, Jungkook said, voice breaking. Every headline, every comment, they're not about you. They're about whether I'm still worth standing next to. The words hit harder than any accusation. Jimin's shoulders tensed. Is that what you think? He asked softly. That I sang because I was protecting myself? Jungkook looked away. I think you didn't think about what it would cost me. The room buzzed with discomfort. One of the executives cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a break. No, Jimin said. He deserves to say it. Jungkook laughed bitterly. Say what? That I'm tired of being the one everyone watches for cracks. That every time I feel like I'm slipping, I wonder if this is the moment they decide I'm replaceable. Jimin's eyes darkened, pain flashing across his face. You think I don't carry that fear too? Then why act like a hero? Jungkook shot back. Why make it look like you're saving me? Because I love you, Jimin said before he could stop himself. The word hung in the air, electric and dangerous. Jungkook froze. The executives stiffened. No one spoke. Jimin's breath came shallow now, eyes locked on Jungkook as if daring him to look away. I love you enough to break rules, he continued hoarsely. Enough to take the blame. Enough to sing when your lungs forget how. Jungkook stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor. This isn't fair, he whispered. You don't get to say that here. Not like this. Then where? Jimin demanded. When? After you've burned yourself down trying to stay acceptable. One of the executives stood. This conversation is no longer appropriate. Jungkook's hands shook as he turned back to Jimin. You promised we'd protect what we couldn't say. Jimin swallowed. I'm protecting you. No, Jungkook said, tears spilling despite his effort to hold them back. "You're forcing me to face something I'm not ready to lose." They were escorted out shortly after, the hallway stretching long and merciless in front of them. The doors closed behind them with a finality that echoed in Jungkook's chest. They walked in silence until they reached an empty practice room. Jungkook pushed the door shut, the click loud in the quiet. He turned, eyes blazing. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Jimin didn't move. "I told the truth." "You told it without asking me," Jungkook said, voice shaking. "You made it real." Jimin stepped closer. "It's been real for a long time." Jungkook laughed through tears. "You think love is enough? That it fixes the fear? The expectations? The world watching us breathe wrong?" "No," Jimin said gently. "I think love is the reason we survive it." Jungkook covered his face, shoulders trembling. "I'm scared," he admitted, the words torn from somewhere deep. "Not of you. Of what happens if I let myself want this." Jimin reached out slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile. He rested his forehead against Jungkook's, their breaths mingling. "Then we'll be scared together." Jungkook lowered his hands, eyes red but clear. "If this destroys everything, then it destroys everything honestly," Jimin said. Not quietly. Jungkook closed his eyes, leaning into him at last. The tension didn't disappear, but it transformed, sharpening into something undeniable. Outside, the world argued and speculated, but inside the room there was only the echo of a song still humming between them, steady and defiant, reminding them both that fear could be faced and love, once spoken, could never be unsung. The practice room lights buzzed faintly overhead, too bright for how exposed Jungkook suddenly felt. "You said it like it was nothing," he murmured, pulling back just enough to look at Jimin, his voice trembling with something sharper than fear. "Like you weren't ripping the ground out from under both of us." Jimin's hands were still hovering near him, unsure whether to hold on or let go. "It wasn't nothing," he said hoarsely. "It was everything I've been holding back." Jungkook laughed, a short, broken sound. "Do you know how many times I've practiced pretending I didn't hear it?" His eyes burned. "The way you watch me. The way you touch my wrist instead of my hand. The way you sing like you're speaking directly into my chest." Jimin flinched. "I thought I was being careful." "You were being cruel," Jungkook snapped, emotion spilling over. "Careful hurts more when you already know." The words sliced deep. Jimin turned away, running a hand through his hair, frustration radiating from him. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" Jungkook demanded. "From yourself? From me? Or from the fact that you want this just as badly as I do?" Silence roared between them. Jimin turned back slowly, eyes dark, unguarded now. "You think this is easy for me?" he asked. "Every time you shake, every time you smile like you're fine when you're not, I have to choose between loving you quietly or loving you honestly." Jungkook stepped closer, anger and longing colliding dangerously. "And you decided for both of us?" "Yes," Jimin said. "Because watching you disappear would destroy me more than any scandal ever could." The door suddenly swung open. They both froze. A staff member stood there, eyes wide, clearly having heard more than intended. They're calling for you," she stammered, gaze flicking between them, the tension unmistakable. "Online. Everything's exploding." Phones buzzed almost immediately. Notifications stacked endlessly, clips, headlines, theories spiraling out of control. Jungkook's chest tightened again, panic clawing up fast. "They're already deciding what we are," he whispered. "Without asking us." Jimin stepped in front of him instinctively, shielding him from the screen glow. "Then let them talk," he said. "They don't get to define this." Jungkook grabbed Jimin's sleeve, fingers digging in. "You don't understand. I've built my whole life on being controlled enough to survive. And I've built mine watching you suffocate," Jimin replied fiercely. "I won't do it anymore." Jungkook's breath hitched. "If I let myself fall, really fall, will you still be here when it gets ugly?" Jimin didn't hesitate. "I already am." The words shattered something fragile and necessary inside Jungkook. He stepped forward, forehead pressing into Jimin's shoulder, shaking openly now. "I'm so tired," he admitted. "Tired of being strong alone." Jimin wrapped his arms around him fully this time, unapologetic, grounding. Then stop being alone. Outside the room, voices rose, urgency growing, decisions being made without them. Inside, Jungkook clutched Jimin like a lifeline, heart pounding but no longer racing toward collapse. After a long moment, Jungkook pulled back, eyes red but resolved. If this becomes a war, he said quietly, don't fight it for me. Jimin searched his face. What are you saying? I'm saying, Jungkook replied, voice steady despite the tears, that if we're going to be destroyed, I want it to be because I chose you. Not because you chose for me. Jimin's throat tightened. He nodded slowly. Then choose. Jungkook inhaled deeply, fear and courage tangling in his chest. He reached for Jimin's hand, interlacing their fingers openly, deliberately. I already have. The door burst open again, urgency spilling in, but this time Jungkook didn't let go. He stood tall beside Jimin, heart still fragile but no longer hidden, ready to face whatever storm waited outside, not as someone being saved, but as someone finally brave enough to stand in love, even if it burned. The press room felt colder than any stage they had ever stood on. Cameras lined the walls like unblinking eyes, their red lights already burning. The air vibrated with anticipation, whispers sharp enough to cut skin. Jungkook could feel his pulse in his throat, every instinct screaming to retreat, to disappear behind the practiced smile he had perfected over years. But Jimin's hand was still in his, warm and steady, anchoring him to the moment. Once we walk in, Jungkook murmured under his breath, lips barely moving, there's no taking it back. Jimin leaned closer, his voice low and unwavering. Then don't think about taking it back. They stepped forward together. The room erupted instantly, shutters snapping, voices overlapping, questions fired like bullets. Jungkook's ears rang as fragments collided around him. Was last night staged? Are the rumors true? Was that song planned? Are you more than bandmates? Jimin's grip tightened just slightly, a silent question. Jungkook swallowed, chest rising and falling fast, then nodded. I'll answer, Jungkook said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. The room stilled, surprise rippling outward. Jimin turned to him, eyes widening just a fraction. Jungkook stepped closer to the microphone, fingers trembling but visible, unhidden. Last night wasn't planned, he said. It wasn't a performance. It was a moment where I couldn't breathe, and someone I trust reminded me how. A murmur swept the room. One reporter leaned forward eagerly. Are you saying Jimin crossed professional boundaries? Jungkook's jaw tightened. I'm saying he saved me. The words landed like a shockwave. Jimin's breath caught, his composure finally cracking. Another voice rang out. Saved you how? Jungkook glanced at Jimin, really looked at him, then faced the room again. By knowing me, he said simply. By seeing what I try to hide. Jimin stepped in then, unable to stay silent anymore. And I would do it again, he said firmly. No matter the cost. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. The tension thickened until it felt impossible to breathe. So you admit your relationship goes beyond, a reporter began. Yes, Jimin interrupted, eyes blazing. It does. Jungkook's heart slammed against his ribs. He turned sharply. Jimin, I'm done pretending, Jimin said, voice shaking but strong. I won't reduce him to a headline or myself to a rumor. What we have is real, and it matters more than being convenient. The room erupted again, chaos blooming instantly. Jungkook felt dizzy, fear and relief crashing together violently. Hands grabbed microphones, voices shouted over one another, but Jungkook only heard one sound, his own breathing, uneven but still there. He reached out, fingers lacing with Jimin's again, this time in full view of everyone. If this ends everything, Jungkook said, voice breaking as he spoke into the storm, then at least it ends with the truth. Security moved quickly after that, ushering them out through a side door as the noise swelled behind them. The hallway beyond was dim and quiet, a stark contrast to the explosion they'd left behind. Jungkook stumbled the moment the door shut, legs giving out under the weight of it all. Jimin caught him instantly, arms wrapping around him before he could fall. I'm sorry, Jungkook whispered, tears finally spilling freely. I dragged you into this. Jimin pressed his forehead against Jungkook's, breathing him in like oxygen. You didn't drag me, he said softly. You chose me. That's not something to apologize for. Jungkook laughed weakly through tears. I'm terrified. I know, Jimin replied. So am I. They sank down against the wall together, hearts still racing, the future suddenly terrifyingly unclear. Outside, the world was already rewriting their story, twisting it into something loud and uncontrollable. Inside that narrow space, though, Jungkook let himself lean fully into Jimin, exhaustion washing over him in heavy waves. If they take everything, he murmured, eyes closing, promise me we don't lose each other. Jimin held him tighter, voice rough with emotion. I promise, he said. No matter what they take. Jungkook exhaled shakily, finally letting himself rest in that certainty. For the first time, the fear didn't feel like a warning, it felt like proof that he was alive, that he had chosen something real. And somewhere deep in the chaos they had unleashed, a quiet truth settled between them. Whatever came next would hurt, would shake them, would demand more courage than they'd ever known, but they would face it together, no longer hiding, no longer silent, no longer alone. The car ride away from the building was silent except for Jungkook's uneven breathing and the distant wail of sirens somewhere in the city. Neon lights streaked past the windows like fractured memories, too fast to hold on to. Jimin sat close, knees almost touching, his presence steady but tense, as if he were bracing for impact that hadn't come yet. Jungkook broke first. You didn't have to say it like that, he whispered, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. You didn't have to say everything. Jimin turned to him, voice low but burning. I didn't say everything. I said enough. That's the same thing to them, Jungkook snapped, finally looking at him. His eyes were red, furious, and terrified all at once. They don't hear nuance. They hear scandal. They hear truth, Jimin shot back. And maybe that scares them more. Jungkook let out a sharp laugh. You talk like fear doesn't own us. Like it hasn't been shaping every decision we've ever made. The car slowed to a stop. The driver announced they'd arrived, voice carefully neutral. The door opened, and the night air rushed in, cold and unforgiving. Inside the apartment, the silence was louder than the press room had been. Jungkook dropped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I can already feel it, he said hoarsely. The comments. The calls. The way people will start treating me like I'm fragile glass. Jimin paced the room, agitation rolling off him. You are not fragile. I am, Jungkook replied sharply. That's what you don't want to admit. I crack. I panic. I fall apart on stage. Jimin stopped in front of him. And you get back up, he said fiercely. Every time. That's not fragility. That's survival. Jungkook looked up at him then, tears streaking down his face without shame anymore. What if I don't want to survive like this anymore, he asked. What if I'm tired of winning at the cost of myself? The question hung between them, raw and dangerous. Jimin knelt in front of him, hands gripping Jungkook's knees. Then we change the cost, he said. Even if it costs us everything else. A phone buzzed violently on the table. Jungkook flinched, Jimin grabbed it before he could. His expression shifted as he read, jaw tightening. They're suspending activities. Temporarily, he said carefully. Separate statements. Damage control. Jungkook's chest caved inward. Separate, he repeated. They're already cutting us apart. They're trying to, Jimin said. That doesn't mean they succeed. Another message came in. Then another. Jimin's face went pale. What? Jungkook demanded. Jimin hesitated, then handed him the phone. A leaked clip. An audio file. A voice that sounded like Jimin's, distorted but recognizable, taken out of context. Words twisted into something ugly, something that painted Jungkook as unstable, as a liability Jimin had to manage. Jungkook stared at the screen, horror spreading through him. That's not, his voice broke. You didn't say that. No, Jimin said, shaken. I would never. Jungkook stood abruptly, backing away. But they'll believe it, he whispered. They'll believe you see me as a problem. Jimin stepped forward urgently. Look at me. You know me. Jungkook shook his head, panic surging again. I thought I did, he said, voice cracking. And now everything feels like it's slipping. Jimin's chest ached. Someone's trying to break us, he said. They're using our worst fears against us. Jungkook's breathing spiraled, hands trembling. I can't do this again, he sobbed. I can't fight the world and my head at the same time. Jimin closed the distance and pulled him into his arms, holding him tight even as Jungkook resisted weakly. Then don't fight, he murmured. Let me. Jungkook collapsed against him, sobs shaking his entire body. Promise me, he choked out, fingers clutching Jimin's shirt, that you won't let them turn me into something broken. Jimin held him like a vow. I promise, he said. I see you. Not the version they edit. Not the version they sell. You. Jungkook's cries softened into quiet tears, exhaustion finally overtaking the panic. He stayed there, pressed against Jimin's heartbeat, letting it guide his own back into rhythm outside. The city buzzed with speculation, betrayal, and noise. Inside the dim apartment, two people clung to each other amid the wreckage, knowing the storm wasn't over but refusing, for the first time, to face it apart. Morning arrived quietly, pale light spilling through the curtains as if the city itself had decided to lower its voice. Jungkook woke first, disoriented for a moment, then aware of the steady warmth beside him. He didn't move right away. He listened to breathing, to distant traffic, to the unfamiliar absence of panic in his chest. For the first time in a long while, his thoughts didn't immediately fracture into fear. Jimin stirred, eyes opening slowly. When he saw Jungkook watching him, he smiled, soft and unguarded. You're still here, he said, half teasing, half serious. So are you, Jungkook replied. They lay there in the quiet, the previous night's chaos already feeling distant, like a storm that had passed but left the air cleaner in its wake. Jungkook exhaled deeply, as if testing the space inside himself. I don't feel fixed, he admitted. But I feel steadier. Jimin nodded. You don't need fixing. Later, when the calls came again, they answered them together. The conversations were tense, voices careful and strained, but something had changed. Jungkook didn't shrink. Jimin didn't shield him. They spoke plainly, without defiance or apology, and when the discussions ended, they were still standing. The world reacted the way it always did, loudly, messily, divided. Some people celebrated the honesty. Others clung to outrage. Headlines bloomed and withered. Opinions shifted by the hour. None of it stopped completely, but it no longer dictated the rhythm of their days. Weeks later, under familiar stage lights, Jungkook felt the old nerves flicker, but they didn't take over. He glanced to the side and caught Jimin's eye. No gesture. No secret signal. Just presence. That was enough. The performance soared, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. When the final note faded, the applause felt different, not heavier, not lighter, just honest. Backstage, Jungkook laughed, breathless, adrenaline still buzzing. I didn't disappear, he said, almost in disbelief. Jimin smiled. I told you. As the noise settled and the night drew to a close, they walked out together, unhidden and unafraid. What the world chose to believe no longer mattered as much as what they knew. Some embraces are forbidden only because they reveal too much truth, and sometimes, letting that truth be seen is exactly what saves you.